Hello and welcome to another podcast edition of Taiwan Talk, ICRT's weekly interview segment, bringing you conversations from and about Taiwan. I'm Keith Manconi. Today, we are kicking off a new interview series for Taiwan Talk. As we've discussed before on the show, Taipei Times features writer Han Cheung is bringing to light important moments in Taiwan's history with his ongoing column, Taiwan in Time. Each Sunday, he takes on one event that occurred during the following calendar week. He explains what happened, why it happened, and why it's still relevant. So here's the plan. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to set aside one episode a month of Taiwan Talk for this recurring segment to highlight his work and Taiwan's history. Today, we're going to be looking at Han's June articles, the four landing between June 5th and June 26th. These are all covering events that happened in Taiwan on some June way back when. Maybe 20 years ago, maybe 50 years ago, maybe a couple hundred years ago. We've got a broad range here. So 4 weeks, 4 articles, quite a lot to get to. So let's get to it. All right, Han Cheung, good to have you back on the show. Welcome back to Taiwan Talk.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we're going to be going through 4 of your articles this week that are each looking at, for very different episodes in Taiwan's history. And we're going to be going into one of them in particular depth because you put quite a lot of work into it. So we're going to be taking a very thorough look at it. But we're going to start off just kind of running through the top 3 just to give our listeners a sense of the body of work that you have put together in this past month or so. So first up, let's go to the beginning of the month. The first one that you wrote, which is titled A Lifelong Desire to Learn. And in this article, you're kind of exploring the life of a woman named Tsai Ah-shin, who just happens to be Taiwan's first female doctor. Now, interestingly here, most people in Taiwan probably would never have known about her if it wasn't for a popular TV series that came out about a decade ago.
Yeah, that's correct. Like in 2005, they made this TV show based on this novel that was made and written by Dongfang Bai in 1990, and that's how a lot of people got to know about her. But it wasn't based. It was based on her, but it wasn't her. So, I don't know how many people knew that it was based on a real person, and because she had a different name in the TV series, and so I don't know how much of the historicity was emphasized in the TV show.
Right. So we are talking about a woman that was born 90 years ago this month, and she really had to be pretty scrappy to get the medical education that she got. Some of it was in Taiwan, and it was very unusual for a woman to get as much education as she did at the time. She got some of it in Japan as well. So she really went through a lot to be able to get the medical know-how that she got.
Yeah, she did. It helped that her family was baptized by George Leslie Mackay, so they had more liberal views on girls going to school, but that wasn't a normal, a typical thing back then. And yeah, just the fact that she even made it overseas to Japan as the first Taiwanese to study at Tokyo Medical College was pretty impressive. And even when I wrote that even when she had to come back to Taiwan due to medical problems, she requests to sit in at a male medical college, becoming the first female co-ed higher education student ever in Taiwan. And
even though probably most people don't remember her too well. And then, there's also the fact that she spent most of her later life in North America and Canada because, obviously there was a lot of strife in Asia and Taiwan in particular. So she kind of fled, went to North America. There is a little bit of a Taiwan legacy there in that she opened a clinic that trained midwives.
Yeah, she first opened her clinic in early June in 1926 in Taichung, and then also a school to train midwives. So yeah, and it was said more than half of the babies in Taichung were delivered by people trained by her. Yeah.
All right. So once again, that is the June 5th article of Taiwan in Time. Let's move on to the June 19th article. This one's titled as the last resistance fell. And this is looking at the very short-lived Republic of Formosa, and one of the key figures that I think you're arguing perhaps got a little bit too much credit for its failed defense.
Yeah. So when the Qing dynasty signed Taiwan over to Japan, the people of Taiwan didn't want to just go down that quietly, so they kind of declared like an independent Republic of Formosa and tried to organize like a resistance against the Japanese. But the funny thing was, all three of the major commanders like ran away, like in the face of defeat, including this guy. So yeah. I'm kind of looking at how he was framed as this like anti-Japanese, like hero of Taiwan, hero of the Chinese people. Like he was, there were like legends about him in China because there was a lot of like anti-Japanese sentiment there. But even before the last stronghold of Tainan fell, like he also ran away to China. So
right.
And yeah, so it kind of looks at that. And
so basically, when the Japanese arrived, they started in Keelung, they took Keelung, then they took Taipei, and in a way, really, the battle was over once Taipei was taken. There's not much that could have happened, but some were expecting the guy in question we're talking about, Liu Yongfu, to protect Tainan. That's kind of where he fled back to. But he left Taiwan and went to China before the advancing Japanese forces even came to Tainan. And I guess he gets the most credit because he was, of the three leaders that you were talking about, he was the last one to retreat, even though he never really engaged like he was supposed to.
Yeah, that's correct. Like the first guy, Tang Jingsong, he was the president of the republic. He fled after Keelung fell, and then the second guy, the vice president, Chou Fengjia, he tried to defend Taipei, but when Taipei fell, he fled to China, and then after that, it was a lot of like local resistance by like civilian militias, and but the Japanese kept pushing south towards, and Liu Yongfu was stationed in around Kaohsiung, and then the people of Tainan invited him and swore him in as this kind of second president of the Republic of Formosa. Historians dispute whether that actually happened, but
because I guess there's a difficulty here, kind of separating the fact from the fiction.
Yeah, because there's a lot of like legends about him and
kind of swirling around.
Yeah. So some say he refused to swear in as president, but anyways, he agreed to lead the resistance. But it was really like the local militias and the other government troops that were fighting until they got to around Changhua, and then that's when his troops kind of went into action. But then after that, they lost that big battle, Baguashan, and then it was kind of like the Japanese the next step was Tainan, and then as they advanced, like 2 days before they entered Tainan, he like got on a ship and fled to China. So
now, okay, so this is one historical figure that has maybe been puffed up to larger than the reality of the situation. But what would you say is the importance, just looking at the broader, event itself, the Republic of Formosa, the loss of Taiwan to Japan? What do you think is the significance of that event in the modern Taiwanese consciousness? When people today kind of look back on Taiwan history, how is that really relevant to the way people think about history now?
I think a lot of it is like, since this republic was so short-lived, and but a lot of people, I don't know if a lot of people know about that there was actually a resistance, or like what actually happened when, because we just learned that the Qing dynasty ceded Taiwan to Japan, but like what really happened during that time, and it was a lot of people actually died in that, like resisting the Japanese, and like they did not want to accept that fate. So I thought that was interesting, and also about like there's a lot of people talk about Taiwanese independence, and there was like this Republic of Formosa back then, but it wasn't really. It was more of like a government kind of plan to like kind of keep Taiwan out of
Japan, most importantly.
but like, how much did they really want independence for Taiwan? Like that's
up for debate a little bit.
Up for debate. Yeah.
All right, so a very interesting and probably under-discussed moment in Taiwan's history. We're going to go to your third article that we'll be discussing for today. This one's Orphans of a Twisted History. You released that on June 26th. This kind of picks up on a similar theme, just in terms of sort of the contested nationalities and contested identities that we find in Taiwan. And you're talking here about the lives and works of Wu Zhouliu, who is a novelist that was writing at a very difficult time to be a novelist in Taiwan's history. During, half of his life was during the Japanese occupation, half of his life was under the KMT regime, and some of his most famous works were written during World War II.
Yeah. This guy's really interesting because, he was born under, when Japan first kind of took over Taiwan, and then he had a pretty privileged background, so he was able to go to college and worked as a teacher. But then there was a lot of conflict. He felt really discriminated by the Japanese as a Taiwanese, so he was fed up with that. He went to China, and then he found that people in China saw Taiwanese people as Japanese spies, and they distrusted him. And at that time, like, China was pretty much like overrun by the Japanese as well. So he coined the term like orphans of Asia for the Taiwanese people. They were not the Han Chinese, but they weren't accepted by China, and they were discriminated by Japan. So that became the basis of his novel that he wrote during World War II, and he had to secretly write it, and he had to hide the manuscripts and disperse them into the countryside. And if caught, he would be probably sentenced to death for treason. So,
Right. So discriminated at home for being Taiwanese under a Japanese regime, then mistrusted in China for being, technically a Japanese national at the time. And I guess the main significance of the work that he did release is kind of giving a much more vivid and honest portrait of Taiwan under Japanese colonial rule than we're probably going to find anywhere else.
Yeah, that's correct. Like even in his introduction to the book, he talks about how much he talks about the historical accuracy of his novel, even though it's all fictional events. But he said before history repeats itself, he wanted to provide like a context of how things really were back then, for future Japanese and future Taiwanese to read. So that was his purpose of writing it. So that's why a lot of people study his novel to look at what Taiwanese society was like back then and after the war, because he kept writing.
All right. Well, we were talking there about Wu Zhouliu. He was born 116 years ago this June. All right, now we are going to turn our attention to the article that you wrote on June 12th, The Well of Miracles. And we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive right here because you did a little bit of Nancy Drew work here and kind of really tried to separate the fact from the fiction. Now, in this case, this is kind of your Dragon Boat Festival article. And here you took on one of the legends that has sprung up in Taiwan associated with the Dragon Boat Festival. And it's also associated with one of Taiwan's most important historical figures going all the way back to the 17th century. When I read about him when I was studying Taiwan history, in English language books, you might see his name written as Koxinga, something with an X like that. But in Chinese, his name is?
His name is Zheng Chenggong.
And why is he important to Taiwanese history?
He was considered the person and army who drove the Dutch out of Taiwan. So back then, he invaded Tainan and then kind of sent the Dutch packing. And then he intended to use Taiwan as a base to revive the Ming Dynasty.
We've heard that before.
Yep. So he tried to do that, but that never really happened, but he established like a kingdom in Taiwan, and it was considered like the first kind of Han Chinese rule or kingdom in Taiwan. And then, but yeah, he never made it. And the Qing dynasty, his kingdom continued for like, I think 2 more generations, and then it was annexed by the Qing dynasty.
Right. So the legend that you bring up in your article comes towards the end of his life, and it involves a well and a sword.
Yeah. So this legend involves, there's this well in Dajia, like north of Taichung. And so every noon at Duanwujie, or Dragon Boat Festival, people go there and line up to get water from the well, which is supposed to cure all kinds of diseases and won't go bad for a whole year. So you can store it.
You can drink that water for a whole year.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was curious. I was looking at unusual Dragon Boat Festival traditions, because we all know about the dragon boats. We know about the zongzi and that kind of stuff. But I was like, there must be something else that people do. So I looked into that. And so the legend has it that this Zhen Chenggong, so he was with his army. There's a lot of versions of the legend, but this is the common one on the official Dajia website. Says
Okay. So the official legend. There we go.
Yeah, the government website. But so he was stranded. He was fighting these Aborigines in that area, and they were stranded on this mountain, and the Aboriginals like cut off their water sources, so they were about to die of thirst, and Zhen Chenggong prayed to the heavens and stabbed his sword into the ground, and water came out, and that saved their life. So
just opened up the tap.
Yep. And it said that they made a well there, and then the sword stayed in there, and then that kind of became like an auspicious well, because it was like related to his name. Yeah.
And wasn't part of the legend that if you looked in, the sword never left, and if you looked into the well, you could find it or something like that?
Yeah, I think it would like rise up every day on Dragon Boat Festival. Because the event supposedly happened around Dragon Boat Festival, like either a day before or the day of. So that's why that's observed during that time. And it's also said that people tried to take the sword out of the well, and they could never succeed. Like, it would just stay in the well.
Okay. Yeah. It's a very King Arthur, Lady of the Lake kind of situation. Now, let's get to the Nancy Drew work that you put into this. So you deduced that this is not likely to have happened.
Yeah, that's correct. So I started...
Just to put a damper on a good story for everybody.
Yeah, so I started looking into the kind of accuracy of this legend. Just wanted to do some detective work and see, like, what's the likelihood of Zhen Chenggong actually being there? Because from what I know, his kingdom was centered around Tainan, and it at most, like, probably the northern border was like Changhua or something. So what was he doing in Dajia, which is just south of Miaoli? So it's pretty far up north. So I started looking into it, and I mean, parts of it do make sense, because during Cheung's fight against the Dutch, and after, they were actually facing a lot of food shortages. So he decided to send his troops north and south to like establish farmland. And according to some like historical sources, these farms actually stretched as far as like Taoyuan. So it's possible. So that area makes sense now. And it was all Aboriginal territory, so of course they would be fighting with Aboriginals. So that makes sense as well. But then I started looking into like, he was the ruler of the whole kingdom. Like, why would he be going with these farmer soldiers?
Single-handedly, really want to make sure that this pig farm is pulling its weight.
Yeah. Like, if you're a ruler of the whole kingdom, you probably wouldn't be doing that. So some versions of the legends address this. They say he was there to boost the morale of his troops, and then they got attacked. So,
if you could make wellspring out of the ground, I guess that was probably a good idea.
Yeah. So that part's kind of covered. It's no historical accuracy, but it is explained. So I decided to look at the dates. So I used this lunar calendar converter tool online, and I found that Dragon Boat Festival in 1662, which is supposedly when the event happened, took place on June 20th. And Zhen Chenggong's historical date of death is June 23rd.
Huh.
So he died 3 days after he created this well.
At a location that's pretty far from
Tainan, and he's known to have died in Tainan. So then I checked a bunch of sources. They're like most biographies on his life say he suddenly fell ill during the 5th month of the lunar calendar of that year. And then I did that conversion again, and that came out to be June 15th. So, and then they say he was sick for a week, and he's just died unexpectedly. So
he was already sick in Tainan by June 15th.
Yeah.
So there's no way he's going up and checking on his hog farmers up in Miaoli.
Yeah, on June 20th.
On June 20th.
Yeah, so I deduced that it probably...
There's something fishy going on
here.
Yeah. It couldn't be the fact that they all said that this water is water that can stay good for a whole year, and maybe that's why maybe that's what took him down. Who knows? Maybe they were wrong about that.
Maybe that's possible.
Interesting. Okay, so what would you say has been the significance of this legend going down through the hundreds of years that it's been around? I mean, is this just a source of local pride, or is there more to it?
It's part of like this guy's legacy, and like how he's still worshipped in some places around the country, and like stuff like that. So it's kind of just an interesting twist on a legend, part of a legend that it's very localized. Like there's
right. So he means something different to people in different places.
Yeah. Like in and for the people of Daja, it was just he was there, and they had this well, and then. But apparently it was pretty important because the government actually renovated the well in like the 1950s, and they gave it the name Sword Well. And before it was called Guoxing Well because Cheung had that means well of the imperial surname because Cheung had he was granted the Ming Dynasty imperial surname by the emperor. So I think it's just it's more of like. Just breaking from like the general myths and legends and kind of looking at the more localized legends and having fun with it. Like yeah.
So it's a way for people to relate to history in a very localized kind of way.
Yeah.
All right, and if people want to visit that well, they can just do that.
Yeah, they could just do that. It's part of like this. It's on a mountain. There are buses that go up there, and it's part of this like. Park, so there's like there's some hiking, there's other things to do around there, and they can visit the well. I don't know how powerful this water is like on days other than Dragon Boat Festival, but I mean you're welcome to try it. And
we can expect a part 2 on this series next year. You look into I guess that would be a different column. That's not really a historical question. It's either maybe chemistry is what we need.
It could be chemistry.
Column.
We could take some water and analyze it and see like and then try to disprove its healing properties.
There we go. That's your next project.
Yeah.
All right. So to round things out, very quickly, you also had an article that came out just yesterday. Tell us a little bit about what people can find in the Taipei Times from yesterday.
So yesterday I wrote about the kind of aerial battles that took place between the communist China and Taiwan over the Taiwan Strait, because on July 5th there was one incident where Taiwan was able to shoot down 5 People's Liberation Army MiG fighters. So I'm kind of using that as a springboard to go into like the general kind of what happened, like all these like aerial battles and what happened between the strait during the times where tension was high and there was actually fighting going on between the two sides of the strait.
All right, so you can find that in the July 3rd of the Taipei Times, either online or the print edition. We've been speaking to Han Cheung about his column, Taiwan in Time. Han, talk to you again next month.
All right, talk to you soon.
All right, you can find his column, Taiwan in Time, every Sunday in the features section of the Taipei Times. We will be getting another Taiwan history snapshot from him next month. For your browsing convenience, I have put together links for all the articles we discussed today right on the ICRT blog. You can find the page for this episode in the Taiwan Talk section of the blog. Follow those links to take an even deeper dive into the history that we've been discussing today. And while you're there, please do leave a comment. Would always love to hear what you have to say. All right, so we're going to have to wrap things up for today for Taiwan Talk and ICRT. I'm Keith Manconi. See you next time.